Hello, everyone. Wish you a very good evening. Here we are again with our 14th and the last episode of season 4. International Council for Circular Economy welcomes you to our Circular Chat series. The Circular Chat is an initiative by the Council to develop and promote the idea of circular economy and its related topics. Today, we have with us Nishant Parekh once again, and the topic of our discussion today is materiality in ESG. Nishant is the associate partner at Impact Consulting, where they help clients in ESG strategy and reporting. He has 12 plus years of experience in this space. He has worked across several sectors and has supported companies in creating sustainability and circular and eco-design strategies and also roadmaps to realize targets and ambitions. As an expert in reporting regulations, standards, and frameworks, he has led integrated annual report projects in large corporates. He has also worked with several leading think tanks and contributed to international publications on circular economy and impact measurement. Hi, Nishant, and I thank you for joining us once again at Circular Chat.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Nishant, so we understand today's topic is materiality. Uh, I know when we talk about materiality, it is considered as an important aspect of the company's strategy today. And examining ESG materiality has now become a corporate requirement with an increasing regard to the ESG issues in the marketplace that we see. But for a layman, for a common man, what exactly is materiality? How would you kind of make a layman understand what materiality is all
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I was also thinking about it while trying to make it understandable to a normal person. So I think there are three key questions that a person can answer to understand what materiality means to them is what is the impact of their own actions on the environment, people, or the economy? So that's the first question that if you try to understand or evolve a bit more, you will get to. So as a normal human person, I use water in my daily consumption. I use energy for electricity. I use energy in my cars that I operate, etc. So those are all the impacts that you create on the environment, people, or the economy. The second question that you should also try to answer to understand the materiality is how does your action affect the stakeholders around you? So if you are, for example, using water and they're using it in excess, would
Mhm.
it be the case that some of the other poor communities, local communities around you will not get access to water that's required? So which stakeholders are being affected by you is also important to understand the materiality. And then it is how does it impact how does your actions affect your own financial perform or your own finances as well? So I think that is also an important consideration to take into by understanding materiality. And basically, materiality is about selecting those 20% of your impacts that will contribute to 80% of your impact towards society. So it's more the Pareto's principle that you would need to apply to understand what do you really need to focus on. And
Mhm.
materiality more traditionally comes from a financial reporting principle. That's the gap principle, and it's around uh, how much information. So, what is the level of information that companies uh, need to uh, need to share in order for the investors to make a reasonable assessment of the company's performance? So that in a nutshell is how I would determine mean uh, materiality with.
Wonderful. Thank you for explaining it in a very, very simplistic manner, Nishant. And as we talk, and since you mentioned about different corporates looking at it from their own aspects, I'm sure that there is not one size doesn't fit all kind of notion also equally applicable to materiality. For all these materiality issues, each organization I understand will have its own set of standards. Plastic industry will be very different from the textile industry, let's say. So, what factors do you think do influence the stakeholder practices, the organization's mission, and even the executive uh, subjective perspective of these organizations?
Right. Yeah. So I think that there's several factors, and I would like to split it down into three main parts. So first is sector agnostic factors, right? So like climate change is just global. It's happening everywhere. Almost all sectors are being affected with it. So it's a sector agnostic problem or factor that needs to be taken into consideration. Biodiversity is another one that's growing in importance. Human rights is also quite as a sector agnostic. So those are the factors that influence stakeholder priorities, organizations' mission vision, and also executives' perspective. The second one is more sector specific, right? So that's when what you just mentioned, right? Packaging industry would have a completely different ESG profile on what issues they need to focus on compared to a food and agri sector company. So regenerative agriculture would be much more important for a food and agri company compared to for the packaging. It's more about using alternative materials to plastic. So that's the sector specific aspect factors that will influence them. And then the last and the more important one also is company specific. So what is the value chain that the company particularly operates in? Are the geographies based more in the developed economies or the higher income economies, or are they dependent more on the lower middle income countries? So how is the value chain of that organization set up? But at the same time, what's the business model behind it? Are you only in the sales of products, or are you providing services? So those factors uh, influence what your stakeholders expect from you. What should your ESG profile look like, or what should your ESG strategy look like, and what would be on the minds of the CEOs or the executives of a particular company?
Very interesting, Nishant. I think since we talk about the management and how the management looks at it, how the CEO or let's say the organization's management looks at it is equally important. And I think generally it could be said that materiality refers to the factors that the organization must consider while evaluating their possibilities and the threats as well. Because today, with the increasing competitive world, and while we talk about the transition from linear towards the circular economy, we are talking about how organizations are not just looking at a linear fashion, but they are also looking at the reverse supply chains because
Yeah.
the policies also does impact that. So can we say that they cannot really afford to disregard these challenges? And if they can't kind of disregard, what are the steps taken by them? What would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question. So it's like often enough, I get these questions also on, should I focus on all my impacts, or should I focus on the most relevant ones, or the ones that I can most create influence or create change on? And again, coming back to my first response, think of Pareto. What are those 20% that you can create a change for the 80% of your portfolio? And it's more about prioritization. And secondly, what I do think here is quite important is, if you look at in the past 50 to 70 years, decisions have been made purely based on financials. So is it good for my revenues? Is it good for my bottom line? Is it good for my assets, etc.? So that has been the sole criteria based on which
in the past
decisions
50,
have been made.
52 sales.
Yeah.
And what needs to happen now is, how do you start accounting for externalities in this decision making and build up a kind of an integral decision making structure? Of course, there'll be trade-offs in the start. So of course there'll be trade-offs between, okay, whether you have to leave out whether it's higher cost to achieve lower impact, environmental impact of a particular product to start with. But that is, over the years, these trade-offs would move towards more and more business models and solutions that will be that will be good for the society or for the environment, and also good for business. So that is where the industries, sectors, and every other businesses are heading as well. So I see the profits and society combining in the coming years as well.
So you're being very optimistic about the kind of the outcome that comes out of it. That's great. Also, when we talk about this, Nishant, another thing that comes to my mind is the investment sector, because a lot of time the financial sector does kind of impact how the organizations are looking at. So, as we speak, ESG analysis is becoming widely accepted, and especially by the investment sector. it is becoming more and more important for the investors to understand the value which is being created by these analysis. How do you think is materiality seen and understood specifically, not to the large corporates as much, because I think large corporates are do have the kind of financial capability, also let's say the socio-economic capability of developing further. But I'm talking specifically from the MSME point of view, where the SMEs do not have that much kind of finance to put into it. And most of the times when we see the entire supply chain, the most impacted are also these people. The socio-economic impact is not at the large sector, but largely at the SME sector. So how do you see this being understood by this sector, particularly materiality as a concept?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. So I do see MSMEs. It will come up onto the MSMEs agenda sooner rather than later. Also, given the context that in the European context that I work in, there's a mandatory sustainability reporting disclosure that larger corporates need to do by 2024. And within those disclosures, the larger corporates need to include their sustainability risks, opportunities, and impacts across the value chain. And that also includes their own suppliers, meaning they would need to get more sustainability related information from their suppliers, which are often MSMEs. Right. So there will be more stringent supplier assessments coming in the coming years to come. There'll be more data requirements, and also companies will be the suppliers will be also selected based on the performance on sustainability related topics next to the financial. So cost aspect could be one of it, but sustainability it will, if not equal, will have some weightage into the selection as well. So in that sense, I see MSMEs would have to be prepared in order to address these upcoming trends. But I also see at the same time, MSMEs can use their own industry profile or their own sector profile to prioritize what they should focus on. So if, for example, what you just said, if you are a packaging manufacturer, as a packaging manufacturer, you already can anticipate that your bigger multinational corporates are really looking for alternative materials to plastic because of the upcoming regulations, etc. So how can you further invest in R&D to build alternative materials, or start sourcing, think about sourcing recycled content in your existing packaging materials? So that's to look at your own sector, subsector profile, and to understand what are the most important ESG issues in your MSME's profile to really highlight the things that you want to focus on. And as I always also said in the beginning, focus on that 20%, and then that's where you will get the biggest impact from. So I think MSMEs, and they can also drive the things much faster, considering that they have leaner organizations compared to the bigger organizations, so they can make decisions quicker. They can pivot quite quickly as well. So I think these are important traits of an MSME to drive socioeconomic development, at the same time drive profitability.
So thank you, Nishant. Since you're talking about the entire scope 2 and 3 emissions of, let's say, the bigger organizations, and entire supply chain has to be, do you think the larger organizations are going to invest, or how these MSMEs will grow by themselves? Is it because they are asked by their suppliers to provide the information, hence the data flowing, or will it be the larger organizations pooling up some kind of resources? It may be the financial resources to build the capacity of these MSMEs. So how do you see this? Is there any particular trend that you see happening anywhere in the world?
Yeah. So I see two. So I think it's both push and pull. So from the pull side, corporates will have started to build up the resources to address these capabilities. So the teams have started to expand. the insights that they need are much more deeper. So they are also investing in IT infrastructure, technologies to get this data, but also get this data up to a level where it is verifiable, accurate, and also being properly used for decision making in the end. So larger corporates are already started to pick up on this, and what they want to move towards is beyond auditing. So far, the supplier assessment has, at the very least, been around focusing on audits to really see, okay, if they tick all the boxes, if they comply to certain minimum requirements, to more involving them in partnership and helping them grow with them, because these are their strategic partners as well. So they want to build long-term partnerships with them, and I think that's where I see more collaboration coming in as well. And in that case, the different companies need to discuss how that collaboration model would look like. So that's more the push side. And I think from the other side, MSMEs uh, are in a fantastic position to shape some of these markets, actually, because they are quite aware of these trends. And as I said, they're quite lean, they're agile, they can shift quickly. So as soon as they hear a smaller demand from the corporate that, okay, this is what we were looking for in 2 years down the line, they could immediately put up their R&D resources or put up their right resources at work to create that future market. So I see MSMEs also some taking the lead in creating these markets, while there's already a push from the larger corporates on this topic.
Wonderfully explained. I think one very important point that you mentioned here, Nishant, is uh, the agility of, let's say, the SME sector, where they could actually make these changes pretty fast, and especially understanding the policy scenario, which is changing. The entire landscape is kind of transitioning at a speed where uh, unless the sector, the entire supply chain is pulled along, it becomes very, very difficult. So coming back to the large corporates, we do understand that while the investors across the world are today looking at ESG very closely and materiality very much being a part of it. Also, they look at certain ESG indicators that are more effective from the financial point of view, also relevance more or less. What strategies do you think should a company look at to align themselves to these kind of indicators?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I think that there are a few things. So how I see it also is that there are different strategies that you could take into account while to align you to your investor needs. Is one is yeah. So I always go back to performing a very strong materiality assessment process is quite important to determine what strategy do you as a company want to move towards. and
Right.
and there I would, so investor, I feel investor is just one stakeholder group that you need to consider. Apart from that, there are NGOs that you would need to take into account, governments, uh, then there are customers. I think those are the most important stakeholder groups that you would need to take into account while developing these strategies. So I think there's a broader stakeholder group that you would need to take into account while determining what are the main topics, what are the material topics that as a company you would like to focus on. And once you have the topics, there are several strategies, right? So one is continuing the same business model as you have right now. But the second one is, next to the same business model, how can you think about, I think circular economy is a fantastic example of different strategies that you can apply. And there are multiple strategies underneath it that you could explore. So how can you start building up low carbon portfolio? So R&D, product innovation is one strategy that you could apply. Business model innovation is a second strategy that you could apply. Partnerships is the third strategy that you could apply. And I think these are the three main that I could think of is the things that you could develop in terms of strategies to equip your corporate or your company towards the future.
I think partnership is something that you have focused on, and a very, very important point. to take away from this conversation is, Nishan, that while we were talking about a competitive world a few decades back, but I think the major focus now remains on how do you collaborate and not get
Exactly.
into reinventing the wheel all over again. It not only kind of gives you a kind of a sudden push to the business, but as well looks at how you are pulling through with other organizations to build a better future for all of us put together. I think, thank you. That's a very, very relevant kind of strategies that we talked about today, Nishan. And when we talk about materiality, I'm coming back to finance time and again because most of the times, what we see with the SME sector or let's say one of the things that is very much essential is the finance. So apologies for coming back to that once again. And what I want to understand is while we talk about the material factors that uh, could be the financial elements that are fundamental to the long-term success of a company's different strategies. How do you see it from your experience? What
Yeah.
are the other material factors, or what else could be a leading indicator and from your experience?
Yeah, so uh, until now, I also often seen companies taking a financial approach towards assessing materiality. So, what is the impact of environmental, social, and governance topic on your business? Is how they assess the materiality until now. But if you closely look into some of these reporting and disclosure requirements and read through the actual text, it's much more about what is the impact of your organization on the environment, people, and the economy. So it's more the impact on society rather than the other way around. So I think, and that should, in my view, should also be the crucial first step. And actually, the upcoming European regulation has made that very explicit that the impact materiality, so the impact of an organization on the environment, people, and economy should be the starting point of your materiality assessment. And once materiality, that assessment is completed, then you assess, okay, what is the financial materiality of that topic on your uh, on your finances as well. So it's, and the finance definition also goes a bit broader than the traditional definition by IFRS. So it's beyond the P&L, cash flow, and balance sheet. It's also whether in the short, medium, and long term would it trigger costs, would it trigger revenues, would it impact your uh, talent pool as well. So those are the considerations that you would need to take in financial materiality. And I'm sure there would be some eyebrows saying, okay, how do you quantify this? How do you translate this? So, and sustainability materiality is still not as mature as financial accounting. Let's be very honest with that. And it will take several years before it moves from this qualitative assessment towards a more quantitative assessment. So we need to acknowledge the quantitative aspect of materiality assessments and not one-on-one compare it with financial materiality or the materiality that's defined by the gap principles.
Very well explained, Nishan. Can we also say, I mean, since you've been referring about not the quantitative but maybe qualitative analysis, it is also a bit of uh, mitigating the risk that the company stands. I think that is equally important for the companies today to be competitive, looking at the changing scenario once again. I think another very important factor is uh, the risk management. I think that also plays a
Absolutely.
very important role out here. Thank you so much, yeah, Nishant. This brings me to the last question of the day. What we understand is that the environmental challenges, since we were talking about the qualitative impact, like the climate change, the natural resource shortage, social issues that we see, the labor practices, the product safety. We are today talking about data security even. And then there are governance issues like the board composition, the executive pay, the tax transparencies. Uh, are these all the material aspect, or you see uh, there are, I mean, these are just as a ESG and materiality typically being towards the material and the component aspect.
So So did you ask, are all these the material topics, or do you see more topics as well? Or
So what I'm saying is, are these also part of materiality when we do the assessments, or we typically concentrate on the material and the component, and these all become a part of the regular
oh,
ESG component?
okay. Yeah, so oh yeah, so these are definitely part of the materiality assessment. So I think what people might often mistake is a materiality assessment is not assessing the material, but it's more about assessing the environmental, social, and governance factors. And when we talk about factors, the environmental factors can be thought from climate change to biodiversity to resource use to water pollution to air pollution to yeah, so several of these topics. Social topics can be thought of. So human rights, within human rights, there are so many more issues: forced labor, child labor, uh, human rights. So forced labor, child
Right.
labor. Then there are social issues such as diversity and inclusion. Then there is local community involvement, etc. And then there are governance issues such as board compensation, uh, board composition, tax transparency, and many more.
Yeah.
So all of this are a longer list. And what happens is governance issues typically are similar across, they are more sector agnostic, uh, while social and environmental issues, we really need to understand the in the sector specific information, but also company specific information. That
Okay.
human rights would be much more of an issue in a company which sources metals from Congo or somewhere else than for someone who is sourcing the same materials from the US. So those are the considerations, and that's exactly where the whole materiality assessment needs to come in to assess what really are the topics that you need to focus on. Yeah.
Thank you, Nishant. There are no questions in the live chat, but there is one question that is coming to my mind. And if I were to ask you that question, uh, we often see sustainability reporting as one of the mandates coming through the policies and the regulations of the country. And often today, specifically, we see a lot of greenwashing happening. Companies coming up with something, calling it to be sustainable, and uh, then ultimately we see that it's not exactly sustainable. A lot of time when I speak to students and we try to find out, uh, a very common example is comparing a plastic bag with a cloth bag or a paper bag for that sake. And when we do the LCA, the results are astonishing to us as well. So a lot of time, while the policies kind of ask the large corporates to make a transition and do something towards being more sustainable, the entire strategy to be more sustainable, we see a lot of greenwashing practices happening. Do you see a correlation between the two, the more stringent policies and that's the greenwashing? Uh, or how do you see it? Because this often comes to my mind and I kind of
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think there's no one answer, but at least how I see it is, so I think we knew about the climate change as an issue for the past 60 to 70 years.
Yeah.
We knew about it. Still, there's no business taking concrete action on it, or if they're taking action, they were not as fast or as clear about on what they are doing. So clearly, the business, even though they are moving in the right direction, they need some further push. And I think that's when regulations come in. Unless and until there is no standardization, there is a gray field which businesses can keep on playing, uh, and there's a lot of subjectivity in place. So that's where I see regulation or standardization globally can play an important role in creating a level playing field in which is just the open football field, or even it's a huge field that anyone can play on any sport in actually. Uh, so that's where I feel that regulations are helping. But at the same time, I do recognize what you say is that often it creates that uh, that sense of ticking the box that, okay, if you are following these requirements, if I tick this box, I'm compliant to this and I won't do X, Y, and Z further than that. So I think that's where there's this another momentum going on around purpose-driven economy or purpose-driven initiatives where purposeful brands are really trying to focus on what is beyond reporting. And that is where I feel most organizations will have to shift in order to also be competitive in the future, but at the same time also attract the right talent, because more and more talents are looking for millennials. Like there are a lot of studies out there. Millennials want to work in an organization that is purposeful. And this is also combined with the whole consumer awareness has increased as well. So the trends are pointing in that direction. So it would be, it's just basically, do you want to miss the boat or do you want to catch it early so that you could sail with it? And that's what I think is where companies would need to move as well.
I have a similar kind of a view. Thank you so much, Nishant. I think I totally agree with you on the fact that if they do not take a move in the right direction, I think they're going to miss fast. And this is one thing that I think the corporates know about. And one thing that I see very particularly in India is also the fact that a lot of time the customers are now asking for
Yeah.
sustainable alternatives. And I think that is going to drive the market. I keep on repeating and saying that this is now becoming a customer driven market, more or less. The second thing that I see is, I mean, I'm telling you from my common experience, is let's say this is the segregation movement that we talk about, and every one of us in the sector of sustainability does talk about the waste segregation. And what I see is a lot of times in when we work with urban local bodies here, uh, it is the consumer, ultimate user, who is saying that what is the use of bifurcating or segregating the waste if it is not collected, and hence the ULBs are pushed to kind of collect segregated waste even if they do not have the infrastructure in place. Again, another example where the customers are leading the kind of change that we want to bring. Thank you so much, Nishant. It was very interactive. It was very interesting to know an insightful discussion that I had with you today. And I'm sure that our audience would benefit from this at large, because we have a huge uh, youngsters who are listening to our chat. And most of the time, these youngsters do ask us how to proceed on these topics. So I think your answers are going to clarify a lot of confusion around. And once again, thank you to you and to our audience. I would like to thank everyone who's watching us today. And if you want to continue to watch uh, the relevant content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our other social media pages. With this chat today, we are going to end our season 4, which was particularly meant for ESG. And we shall have our season 5 starting up very soon. Thank you so much. And I will wish you, Nishant, and everyone a very happy new year.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thank you.